Hey, what's going on? It's at the letters for Wednesday, February 9th. Arden Zwelling and Ben Nicholson Smith. Our producers are Christian Ryan and Nick Andrade. And today is going to be a bit of a prospect episode. We're going to talk minor league baseball with Ben Badler of Baseball America. He's going to take us through the Blue Jays system, some of the big names that you've definitely heard of before, maybe a few deeper cuts that don't get talked about as much. And we're really just going to cover off everything that's going on within the Blue Jays farm system because at the major league level, Ben, not a whole lot to talk about as we sit here today on February 9th. Under normal circumstances, this is when you and I would be like preparing for spring training camps to open in about a week. And we'd be thinking about, how the Blue Jays are putting the finishing touches on their roster. And what we're going to talk about is, pitchers and catchers report in Dunedin. And that is very much not the case right now as MLB management continues to lock out its workforce and really isn't even negotiating anymore on a new collective bargaining agreement. The MLBPA filed its latest proposal about a week ago, and MLB's owners have opted not to even counter it. So I think, Ben, it's pretty safe to say that a week from now, you and I are not going to be talking about Blue Jays spring training.
Oh, I think that's very safe to say. Yeah, I mean, it's a good time to have Ben Badler on. He's just a great source of knowledge with Blue Jays prospects and all prospects around baseball. So looking forward to chatting with him. But yeah, we are not going to be in Florida. We might not even be talking about going to Florida. We'll see. I mean, it's not great right now. The talks between these two sides continue very slowly. MLB brings in this request for mediation. Is going too slowly. Well, you didn't really talk to the players for about 6 weeks there, so that might have something to do with it. We'll see. I mean, I still remain somewhat optimistic, actually. And, you look at just the calendar. Obviously, it's going to start late. That's a fact. We might miss some regular season games, but they're going to reach an agreement. These sides need each other. There's no other group of players that even remotely compares to these 1,200 athletes. And there's no other group of teams that these guys are going to all go play for. So they're going to reach a deal. This union and this league will reach a deal. I still think that we get most of a season in, but right now it's not looking great.
Yeah, I seem to remember the commissioner saying that the lockout was meant to speed up negotiations. Hasn't quite played out like that to this point, and I wish I was as optimistic as you are that we're going to see baseball anytime soon. I'm more pessimistic on it right now. I kind of think our winter of discontent shall continue for a bit longer until there's some like real tangible pressure on either side in terms of regular season games being missed and revenues being lost and paychecks not being made and a $5,000 stipend for the players not really getting it done with the cost of living of certain guys and and on the ownership side missing gates, having to missing TV revenues, things like that. Like until pocketbooks start getting hurt, like I'm just not really sure where the leverage point is going to come to move things forward towards an agreement.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think socially the pressure is going to shift a lot. Super Bowl Sunday, after that, things kind of shift to baseball. I think we're going to see the public discourse amp up a little bit in the next few weeks. And I think within a month, camps are open. I don't know, like if I put the over-under Arden at camps open, we're recording this on February 9th. Do you think they're open in a month from now?
So for camps to open on March 9th, that would take an agreement like probably 7 days prior to that, maybe even 10, but we'll say 7, just because you're going to have this, like, first of all, you're going to have to ratify an agreement, then you're going to have all kinds of transactions going on, like you're going to have to finish filling out rosters, trades are going to happen, arbitration cases still need to be settled, free agency, all kinds of stuff. You got to fly guys in, you got to get them into camps, you got to get guys in from overseas, you got to do your intake processes, you got to do your physicals, you got to do COVID testing, all that stuff. So you got like at least a week to get camps open. So you're going to need a deal to be ratified 7 days prior to that. So that really means you're going to need an agreement in 3 weeks. I don't see any reason to be optimistic that there's going to be an agreement in 3 weeks.
I will say that in a month camps are open. And the reason is not anything that I'm seeing right now. It is just the knowledge or the expectation that at some point things are going to have to shift. The talks, the pace of these talks will have to accelerate. And we've seen that in years past. When it gets really close to crunch time, then we see things accelerate and we see some big strides made in a short period of time. And I still have at least a sliver of optimism that that will be the case.
Yeah, a lot of things are going to have to happen quickly. Those negotiations are going to have to occur very quickly. An agreement would have to come quickly. And then once there is one, spring training is going to be like shotgun spring, man, like 3 weeks, maybe 4. I'm sure players are going to want like 28 days. We'll see if they get that. Before 2020 season started, it was 21 days. So we'll see how long this camp is, but it's going to go like that. And then it's going to be right into the regular season. So at some point, things are going to happen very quickly and be very hectic. But that's not how I would describe the pace of things as we sit here right now. But that's okay, because we got other things to talk about. The Blue Jays system. Ben Badler from Baseball America is going to join us. You can follow him on Twitter at Ben Badler. And we're going to touch on all things Blue Jays minor leaguers and just take stock of where this organization is at beneath the surface. So after this, when we continue on At the Letters, we will talk to Ben Badler. All right, Ben Badler is with us. Ben, thanks so much for the time. Very much appreciate it. Really looking forward to hearing your insight on the Blue Jays system. Because it's kind of it's kind of an interesting time for the system right now, right? When you look at what's happening with the club at the big league level, they're very much in win now mode, and that's been fueled partly by some graduations from the system of some very good talent. It's also been fueled by some trades of some very good talent. But I guess as the Blue Jays go forward, unless they raise payroll like by a pretty unprecedented and dramatic degree, they're going to need to continue doing those things. That they're going to need to continue tapping into their prospect capital to trade for players. They're going to need to continue having this upward momentum of young players supplementing the roster. So how do you kind of feel they are positioned right now to continue on those two tracks? Like, do they have the talent? Do they have the depth to continue doing these things? Or are the cupboards starting to get a little bit bare with what we've seen in the last couple of years?
Well, I think the farm system has declined from what it was a year ago or 2 years ago, but for the right reasons, right? That you talked about. You graduate Vladimir Guerrero and Bo Bichette and Gurriel and Alek Manoah and all these guys, and you're trading to upgrade your big league team. You're trading away Austin Martin. You're trading away Simeon Woods Richardson and some other depth players too. So yeah, like you're not going to have a top 5 farm system anymore. But obviously those obviously traded away Woods Richardson and Martin, but Guerrero and Bichette and Manoah, these guys are going to form the core of what is already a very good young club, and I think a team that is positioned as well as anybody to be a consistent playoff, if not World Series contender over the next 5 years. It's there's still players in the farm system obviously who are talented. Obviously Gabriel Moreno is the big one. He's he's not Adley Rutschman, but he's the number 2 catching prospect in all of baseball. A really close to the major league guy who could be an impact player. So if you just look at the farm system, obviously it's not what it was a couple of years ago or even last year, but it is for the right reasons. They have this very talented young team that I think should be competitive. Obviously the AL East, there's some good competition around there. The Rays are consistently up there. They still have one of the best farm systems, and the Red Sox and the Yankees and the Orioles are on the way up now. So it's a very talented division, obviously. But if you just look around the major leagues at the teams with the best young talent, not just the farm system, but the overall organization, I think the Blue Jays are really well positioned coming up for the next 3-5 years.
Yeah, they definitely belong in that discussion. I think if you expand it beyond, like you say, the farm system to that under 25 group, or that group of players that's 2 years of service time and below, like that's a lot of talent there. And we want to get to some specific names in the course of our time with you here. But I guess building on Arden's question there, generally speaking, you see some farm system rankings coming out this time of year, and some of them vary on where they have the Blue Jays. So in your estimation and the estimation of BA, where do you guys see the Toronto Blue Jays farm system at this point?
It's more middle of the pack right now. I think having Gabriel Moreno in the organization, somebody who's I believe we have him in our top 10 prospects overall. I don't have our top 100 in front of me right now, but he drives a lot of value for that farm system. So you have players like, him, Orelvis Martinez, Nate Pearson is still prospect eligible for us, and Jordan Groshans and Gunnar Hoagland coming in at their first round pick this year. So it's a pretty solid group, I think, at the top 4 or 5, 6, Otto Lopez, those kind of guys. It's a pretty solid group at the top, and a strong number 1 in Gabriel Moreno. By the time you get toward, I think, the back of their top 10, it really starts to drop off. Not to say there aren't good players who are still in that 10 to 30 range in the system, but you just stack it up against the depth of some other teams, and I don't think it stacks up quite as favorably when you compare them with the rest of the organization. So it's not an elite farm system the way it was a couple of years ago, but it's for all the players they've graduated and traded away to try to win now in the last year or so. It's still a solid middle tier type system right now.
And you mentioned the value that Moreno is driving, and it's been kind of impossible not to get flattened by the hype train behind him over the last 12 months. You mentioned you have him, and he's number 7 on Baseball America's top 100 right now. He wasn't even on the top 100 a year ago at this time, so it's pretty impressive. That's a pretty big shot up that list. What is sort of the process behind that result? What are sort of the traits and the abilities that you're seeing from him that has really powered this hype train behind him for the last 12 months?
Yeah, it's certainly, I think last year was our most challenging year ever to try to put together a top 100 or top 30s for an organization, because there was no minor league season. We were going off of we got good new information from the alternate training sites and instructional league and some winter ball stuff, in Venezuela or the Dominican Republic, but it's nowhere near the same as a normal minor league season, and teams outside organizations are not coming in to see those alternate training sites. So it sounded like Moreno, when he was at the alternate site in 2020, was lighting it up there, but he also got there kind of late. So it's tough to say, kind of a smaller sample, how much of that was real or not. We liked him, obviously had him in their top 10 coming into the year, but hard to know how much stock to put into that. And then he came out in 2021, and he missed time obviously with the injury, but the feedback on him was just glowing. And like you said, it's evaluators who are typically ice cold in their honesty. If they don't like something, they're not afraid to say it. We're coming back and just absolutely raving about Moreno. I mean, he's always been a very athletic player for a catcher with very good hand-eye coordination. Has never really struck out much, but if you go back and look early into his career, I mean, I think in the Dominican Summer League, his first year, his slash line was 2-something, 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 right? He was not striking out, but he wasn't really making any impact with the ball. So since then, I think his swing has sort of evolved to incorporate some more dynamic movements where, all right, he still has those innate bat-to-ball skills where he's never going to be a guy who's going to strike out too much. But as he's gotten stronger, as his swing has evolved, now he's, learning which pitches to try to drive. His swing is more conducive to him hitting for power too. So, you have that on the offensive side, and then defensively, he's made a ton of strides too, where the reviews on his defense this year were strong, both, in season and, after it too, when I went to the fall league. So, I think it's a really strong year overall in the minor leagues for catching. Obviously, Adley Rutschman within the division with the Orioles, but guys like Francisco Alvarez with the Mets and Diego Cartaya and Tyler Soderstrom, and I think we have a dozen catchers in our top 100. But you can make it maybe a case for Alvarez or maybe Keibert Ruiz with the Nationals, but we're getting pretty consistent feedback that Moreno should be not just the number 2 catching prospect in baseball behind Adley Rushman, but should be in our top 10. So yeah, like you said, it's been a pretty significant upward jump based on a lot of really glowing feedback from the scouting community on him.
That's really interesting. I mean, it's definitely an exciting prospect for Jays personnel, for Jays fans, I think, to keep an eye on in the next little bit. I'm wondering, like, what the data looks like to the extent that that's out there for minor league players making their way up through the system. But for Moreno in particular, do you have a sense of what his max exit velos would be looking like? Like, where is that game power looking like for him as he advances further up through the minor league system?
Yeah, I mean, I think early on in his, I don't have the exact exit velo numbers early in his career, but I mean, you could see it in his early career numbers. Like he was I think he probably signed at 17 or 18, just not a lot of strength, not really driving the ball. But, if you looked at him a couple of years ago, it was more probably like topping out around 100, 101, 2, something like that. We have him, I believe last year it was up to 108. So, it's not Vlad, it's not, Bo, it's not that kind of power. I think it's still probably more of a hit over power type profile with him, but there is, I would say average major league power in there, which, if you have a catcher, it could be a plus to plus plus type of hitter. Yeah, especially with the quality of or lack of quality among catching in the major leagues right now for certainly on the offensive. And I mean, it's just the overall package is a chance to be a perennial all-star type of guy, I think.
Does he chase a lot,
When
or
you
is he pretty disciplined when it comes to that plate approach?
I mean, I wouldn't call him a selective hitter. I think he has started to make better decisions at the plate because even when he was in rookie ball, right? Like he could, sometimes that hand-eye coordination can be a gift and a curse, right? Like, okay, there's this pitch on the outside corner and I can make contact with it, but it's a 2-0 count. Should I really be swinging at that? Or that pitch that's, 1-0 that's in the dirt, or not in the dirt, but outside the strike zone, and he has the the bat to ball ability to make contact and put the ball in play. But should I swing at that? No. So I think he's gotten better in terms of his selectivity in that regard, but it's still an aggressive approach. It's not a free swinger by any means, but I think he's gained a better understanding of, all right, these are the pitches I need to be targeting. This is my hot zone where I should be, trying to swing and do damage on these pitches, and you're seeing more power come out that way. But, I don't think he's going to be, a high 300s on base type guy or 400 on base type guy, because I don't think it's that, it's not the Vlad type of discipline or some of the, elite hitters in the major leagues where you see that really, really tight strike zone discipline from him.
Do you kind of grade offense for catchers on a bit of a curve, just considering, like you kind of alluded to it, like major league catchers really do not hit anymore? Like I think the league average OPS for the big league catcher this year was or last year was, in the high 600s. Like it's really nothing impressive. Like, so for a guy like Moreno, if he didn't stick behind the plate and if he, say became a third baseman for a team that has a pretty wide open spot at third base and has since Josh Donaldson left, like would that change the evaluation of him offensively?
I mean, just as far as the volume of, he would get to play more, right? Like if you can play every day almost at third base, you obviously can't do that if you're catching, and it does give your body a little bit more of a break to, just be playing third every day instead of catching. But, I think just you do get extra credit, obviously, if you're able to stay behind the plate. The value of what you're able to produce, like you said, relative to the position is going to be significantly higher as a catcher. So, sometimes I think we, maybe more so with amateur catchers than pro guys, where we, sometimes just as an industry, I think fall into a trap of, oh, well, this guy is so good defensively as a catcher. If he just hits enough, well, it's like, well, maybe, but like you still have to face major league pitching every day, right? So it's the bar is still really high to be able to hit that. But again, like you said, it's not maybe it changes because the quality of catching right now in the minor leagues is so good. But yeah, that's why it's even more enticing to have a guy like him who can stick behind the plate, and be able to potentially produce what he could, offensively as well.
So these things are always impossible to predict. But with that said, if in 2 or 3 years Moreno's up in the majors and he's hitting 275, 350, 500 with 20 homers, are you surprised, shocked, just totally? Is that where does that land with you?
Yeah, I think that's like pretty reasonable expectation of what he could be if everything works out. I don't know that's necessarily like the mean,
Right.
like average, like
Yeah.
expected outcome of what it is, of what he will be. But yeah, I think that's a very reasonable scenario where if everything goes right for him, he could be that type of guy.
On the topic of Venezuelan catchers, I wonder if I could ask you about Louis Meza as well, who the Blue Jays just he's headed the Blue Jays international class this year, got a pretty sizable bonus, and even the Blue Jays didn't have a lot of money to spend because they signed George Springer in free agency. How do you rate Meza at a very young age? Obviously, as difficult as it is to project these guys when they're 16, 17 years old, but sort of what's the book on him and the scouting report there?
Yeah, one of the best catchers in this year's international class for, not necessarily just for the Blue Jays, but just overall. I think some scouts think he's right up there with some of the better catching prospects who've signed internationally in recent years, and there's been some good ones with, I mentioned Alvarez and Cartaya, two other Venezuelan catchers. So I saw him. It's been a long time since I've seen him in person, just because of the speed of the international market and just the realities of how it works. I think it was in Aruba, and I want to say November 2018.
Wow.
So like these guys can obviously change so much in shoot 2, 3, 4 months, let alone that long of a time. But yeah, I mean the updated reports on him, which are not analogous to maybe our draft reports where everybody is seeing pretty much every top player for the draft, all the way leading up to the draft. So not every team was scouting Luis Meza, super heavily by any means, leading up to January 15th. But the reports have still been really strong on him, both offensively and defensively. So definitely want to see just how he does this year. I would think in the Dominican Summer League, because I think he's a guy who, a good player to add to the organization, and a guy who has just at least the upside to be top 10 in their system a year from now, the way that Manuel Beltre is right now.
With another top prospect for the Jays, Orelvis Martinez, he showed a lot of power in 2021. Really opened some eyes and advanced his own stock, both within the organization and then more broadly. So as he takes his next steps, and he's still just gotten to those low levels of the minors so far, and clearly more tests await him as he makes his way further up. But where do you see the kind of range of outcomes for him? I mean, clearly you're talking about a very powerful infielder at this point, and yet there's not certainty in the same way that you might have with someone who's a bit closer to the majors.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a high profile guy for a long time, for them. Not that he's even been in pro ball for all that long, but he's always, been regarded as one of the better, offensive minded infielders, since he was coming out of the Dominican Republic and signed in 2018. And every year he kind of proves that to still be the case. I think right now it's more of a power over hit type profile with him. Not that he's a bad hitter, but just the power has really taken off. It's really loose, whippy type bat speed. Pretty the chance for plus, if not better, power once he's at full physical maturity, because there's still some more strength projection in there. I think he's going to be a really big, strong man once he's done filling out, and I don't think it's going to be shortstop long term. I don't think that's ever been a real expectation. Maybe the Blue Jays have been more hopeful or more optimistic in that regard, but I think he has to be a more selective hitter. We've seen that. It seems like almost every time he moves up a level, he falls back into some bad habits and then is able to make adjustments. So, he does need to tighten up his strike zone discipline. But I mean, he went on a stretch last year where it's like every day he was hitting a home run or a couple of home runs in a game for that. There was like a week or a couple of weeks there. So, he has impact power, and I think has a chance to profile really well at third base. But like you said, he's still in A ball and is going to have to really tighten up his approach as he faces more advanced pitching for that to continue to work for him.
Thinking about guys like him and Moreno, it kind of seems like the Blue Jays have had some pretty interesting recent successes on the international market. Like you throw in guys like Leo Jimenez and Miguel Geraldo. Like the top 10 is kind of littered with these international guys. Is that exceptional at all? Like, do you think the Blue Jays are, kind of doing better, like industry wide in terms of unearthing productive big leaguers, or potentially, I guess none of these guys are big leaguers yet, potentially productive big leaguers on the international market, or are they doing a better job of developing guys? Like, what do you think's kind of going on beneath the surface there?
Yeah, I think they're doing a really good job in the international market, and you can go back to there's been some staff turnover since then, but guys like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Lourdes Gurriel, obviously a different situation with with the contract that he signed, but he was not a consent. I should say I liked him quite a bit coming out of Cuba. There were people who did not. I think it ended up being a really good value for the Blue Jays to get him, but yeah, there's a lot more depth of guys. Obviously, Orelvis Martinez and plenty of other guys. I mean, when they've spent big money on a player, they've typically hit on those guys. Eric Pardinho, we'll see. Some of that is just the nature of pitchers just getting hurt, unfortunately, in his case. But yeah, it's a really good, I think, mix of both hitting on their high end guys when they spend big money on somebody like Vlad Jr. Or Orelvis Martinez, but then also getting some of these more under the radar type guys like like a Gabriel Moreno or or an Otto Lopez or some of these other guys like like Leo Jimenez who you mentioned. So yeah, I think they're doing one of the better jobs internationally in baseball right now.
So with Martinez in particular, I mean, is he someone, if he is off shortstop in a few years' time, is he someone who's likely third base, corner outfield? Like, is that where we see him? And then offensively, what does that profile look like? Is he more of like a 35 homer guy who hits for a low average and just kind of delivers on that power production side, or and of course understanding that there's still a really big range for these guys?
Yeah, I think defensively, third base is the best spot for him. I remember seeing him when he was an amateur player in the Dominican Republic, and that's always kind of been the thought on him is, all right, here's a really high upside offensive type of infielder who will probably go to third base because, just the range, the footwork, the first step quickness is just not really there, I don't think, for shortstop, but plenty of arm strength, and there's enough there defensively to with his hands, with his arm strength to handle third base. So still some defensive value there, being able to handle third instead of having to go out to left field or first base or something like that. And then offensively it's more power than hit. Not that he's a bad hitter or anything. He's not like up there striking out all the time, but the strikeout rate is higher than you would like to see especially at the A ball level. So some of that just is cutting down on some of the chase habits that he has. So it'll probably, it looks like at this point, end up being a little bit of a lower average relative to the power numbers. But I mean, he almost hit 30 home runs this year in like 100 something games. I'm pretty sure it was. So Yeah, definitely a chance to be a 30, maybe 35 plus home run type guy down the road.
Yeah, it feels like we've been hearing about him forever, but he's still just 20
Right?
at
Yeah, I mean, it's
Vancouver.
like when you're signing these kids at 16 years old, and it's almost like prospect fatigue sets in by the time they're the same age as the college junior that you're drafting. I think we ranked Gary Sanchez number or like top 10 at least in the Yankees farm system for like 8 years in a row, and it's like, well, he's still like 23 so by the time he graduated. So yeah, sometimes just that prospect fatigue sets in a little bit earlier on some of these guys.
Well, and it's maybe a little telling that we've come this far and we haven't even mentioned the name Jordan Groshans, who is like maybe one of the first guys that we would have talked about in prior years. But it kind of seems like he had this 2021 season in which maybe opinions have divided on him a little bit. Like it was still pretty good numbers, like at Double A is, and again, still a young guy, still just 21. Like I feel like his numbers look pretty good on paper, but then you look at the context of first round pick and some of the expectations and the way he was being talked about in previous seasons, and then maybe it looks a little bit underwhelming in that context to certain people. Like where do you kind of fall? Are you trending more bullish on Jordan Groshans? Are you more bearish? Like kind of what's leading you in the direction that you're going in on him?
So I think at this point he's sort of like a borderline top 100 prospect right now. He didn't make the cut for our top 100 this year, but he's right in that mix. I mean, there's not a great difference, right, between the number 84 prospect in baseball and whoever would be number 122, right?
Right.
It's not like the difference between number 10 and number 50. It's all kind of the same tier of players. So I mean, the good thing with Groshans, I mean, one, he mostly stayed healthy, right, and just stayed on the field, which has been an issue for him previously. He did get a pretty aggressive assignment. I mean, as a 21-year-old who didn't play in high A before, they sent him to Double A, and he really barely played in Low A in 2019 either, just because the season ended after the foot injury. So not a guy with not a lot of experience, still hit 290, pretty solid bat to ball skills, good contact hitter. But he's I think Orelvis even has a little better chance of staying at shortstop compared to Groshans, and I still think Orelvis is a third baseman long term. Groshans, I think, almost certainly is going to third base, and now we saw a solid year from him offensively, at least in terms of the contact, but the power that was, I think, expected from him earlier on in his career wasn't really there, and maybe some of that is just orienting his swing more to contact this season, and maybe he can open it up a little bit more and take some more chances to try to drive the ball for some power going forward, and just finding that right balance between contact and power. But I think that is one of the concerns now is, all right, well, does he have the power to be an above average guy at third baseman as an everyday player? There's a little bit more of a kind of a split camp on that certainly than there was maybe coming into the year with him. So a solid year overall, but still left with some more a little bit more of like a lukewarm reviews than maybe expected coming into the year from a lot of the scouts who saw him this year.
It is a pretty interesting question with Groshans, right? Like how you project him, because obviously internally for the Jays, that is a position where they could use some help. And then even if you look at trade options that they could be considering or that other teams could be wondering about in the course of this extended stretch where they can't actually talk to each other, you do wonder about him in trade talks, right? So you've got, Cleveland, for instance. A lot of Blue Jays fans love the idea of Jose Ramirez. Of course, Jose Ramirez is one of the best players in baseball. Who wouldn't love that idea? Then you start looking maybe a bit more realistically. You got Oakland, you got Matt Chapman. As you are kind of assessing Groshans, not only from a skill standpoint, but from a value standpoint, where he fits in the industry, do you think that he could be a centerpiece in trade talks for a Matt Chapman, for Jose Ramirez? Like, where does he sit on that value scale to you?
Yeah, that's a good question because when you talk to scouts outside the organization who saw him this year, I didn't get the sense that everybody was like super fired up about Jordan Groshans, right? Like Orelvis Martinez is somebody where you can find scouts where if you think Orelvis can just develop into like a 275 type hitter, well, with his power and if he's hitting 30 35 home runs, you can find people who think he's going to be an all-star third baseman, and you can also find people who have more hesitancy on him and see a lot more risk because of some of the chase tendencies and the swing and miss risk that he showed in A-ball. So you can find more of like a split camp on him, but you can still find organizations that would be really, really high on Orelvis Martinez. And, certainly it's like I don't talk to every single person in baseball, right? But I don't get the sense that there's a team out there, at least that I'm aware of, where they're viewing Jordan Groshans as like, oh, like we would love to target Jordan Groshans as, this, like you said, the centerpiece of a trade for a potential impact type guy. I think, Orelvis would probably be more of that guy, or, I'm sure other teams would certainly love Gabriel Moreno. And I know the, Blue Jays have some catchers who like quite a bit. With him and Alejandro Kirk. So, it might be somebody on the major league roster, but I would have a harder time seeing Groshans as like the guy, where you're centering a trade around him for, an impact guy like a Jose Ramirez or somebody like that.
Yeah, it's interesting how kind of the stocks have risen and fallen over the last couple of years for like some of the reasons you were alluding to earlier, right? Like you get, a pandemic season where there's no minor league games played and you're dealing with, some maybe at times unreliable alt site data. And then, last year you're finally seeing guys in games again and perceptions are changing. And like even along the lines of Ben's question with regards to trades, the Blue Jays packaged Austin Martin and Simeon Woods Richardson in a deal for Jose Barrios. And at the time you look at it and you're like, wow, like that's look, Jose Barrios is fantastic. He, two top 100 prospects, like seems like a pretty good, seems like a fair price to pay, two top 100 guys at the time. And then you look at the Baseball America list now, Simeon Woods Richardson isn't even on it. And Austin Martin fell out of the top 20 down to around, the sort of 45 to 50 range. Like how have perceptions on those two guys, Martin and Woods Richardson, sort of evolved and changed over time? Because it seems like I hate to refer to players in this way, but it seems like the Blue Jays in a sense did sell a little bit high on those guys when they made that deal at the deadline last year.
Yeah, I think Woods Richardson's stock has certainly more than Martin's. I think has dropped more. I think his, he's always threw a lot of strikes, and there's just maybe some questions just about the pure stuff that popped up a little bit more this year. Austin Martin, I mean, we're just talking about Groshans and how, at least, the people we talked to, you can't really find, or we couldn't really find somebody who was like super fired up about him, but you could still find people who really liked Austin Martin. So I could see why he would be the kind of guy who would be the centerpiece of a trade like that for, to bring in, a pitcher of that caliber. But, and we still have him, I think, like around, 50 or so in our top 100. So he's still a very good prospect. And another guy who, like Groshans, got a very aggressive assignment, I think, to Double-A, considering he, 2020, he was at Vanderbilt. And not only was he at Vanderbilt, well, the college season got killed pretty quickly because of the pandemic, so he didn't even play that much there. So, all right, like he was at the alternate training site there, but it's not really the same. So he's skipping low A, skipping high A. You're sending him right there, and he still had a solid year in terms of the contact skills. He has outstanding strike zone discipline and a pretty short swing. I think he's always going to make a lot of contact and control the zone pretty well. But it was really light contact with him, and I certainly would prefer to have in general a hitter who controls the zone and makes a lot of contact now, and hope that he can develop power later, whether that comes through just more strength as he gets older, or just from becoming more self-aware as a hitter of, all right, this pitch I should learn to, turn on and try to drive for damage. Like, we've seen like Christian Yelich or, Jose Ramirez is another good example of a guy who did that, never hit for really any power when he was in the lower minor leagues, and now is one of the better power, or just better, or just most complete hitters in baseball. But with Martin, I don't know that that's actually going to happen with him. And then there's all sorts of defensive questions on him too, right? Like he's played shortstop and moved around the infield and the outfield, but he still has throwing issues. So it's hard to see him playing the left side of the infield. So it's probably the outfield for him. So you have these defensive question marks. You have this power and impact question marks on him, but at the same time, he makes a lot of contact, really controls the strike zone very well, and hit at least for average in a pretty aggressive assignment again to Double-A. So there's an outcome where he is an average 2+ every day big leaguer. I'm not quite sure where, probably in in center field or maybe at second base where the throwing issues might be minimized. But you can, so there's more of I think a split camp of guys on Martin where you can really find guys who are still in on him, but you're also going to see guys who are like, I don't know, like there's some more red flags there.
For sure. Now, another player that the Jays have had some interest in, so far resisted that interest, held on to him, would be Nate Pearson. I don't know if he technically qualifies as a prospect anymore, but kind of still in that young player territory. And from my perspective this past year, he just wasn't throwing enough strikes. Like stuff was still there. He's throwing hard. He's got good off speed. Just wasn't in the zone enough. I mean, what's your read on Pearson and what's next for him? Because you don't want to be too dramatic about it and say this is his make or break spring. It's all on this this upcoming spring. But it is a big year for him as he kind of takes that next step in what his career will be.
Yeah, I mean he's turning 26 this year. I mean I don't know. He's such a tough one to figure out what to do with, because like you said, I mean, this guy still touches low 100s at times with his fastball. When his slider is on, it's a plus pitch. Swing and miss, you'll see it too with the curveball and changeup at times. But like you said, he needs to throw more strikes, needs better fastball commands, and then the other thing is he just needs to stay healthy. I mean, I just don't know that he has the durability to hold up as a starting pitcher long term and throw 180 plus innings in a season. I don't think we've ever really seen him throw more than like 105, 110 innings in a season. Some bad luck obviously is in there, and then there's the pandemic too. So don't want to hold that against him, but there's definitely some medical red flags in there. So I think if he can handle a starter's workload, it's still a potential mid-rotation or higher guy, but just all those durability concerns point to a lot of signs that maybe he better fits in as this high leverage reliever. But again, even in that role, like you said, he's just got to throw more strikes and have some better command of his fastball.
So I've got a couple deeper cuts that I'd love to wrap up on. Ben, I don't know if you have any other high-level questions that you want to ask.
I think it's time for the deep cut.
This is for the nerds, right? But it's interesting because the thing I love about Baseball America's rankings or about your prospect list is that you rank tools as well, like the best tools in the system. And I'm always very interested to see who has the best strike zone discipline. Is ranked by Baseball America, just knowing the importance the clubs put on swing decisions and strike zone management. And this year it's Spencer Horwitz, who is a guy who really put himself on the map last year in Vancouver, and then went off to the fall league and was like as hot as the surface of the sun all of a sudden. To your mind, what is behind his breakout? How realistic is it? How sustainable is it? Like, is he, becoming a real option as a big leaguer in this organization?
I think this year will be big for him because we're finally get to see him, like you said, really good in the Arizona Fall League. But our first real extended look at him against upper level pitching. So he was, a late round picked out of Radford a few years ago, and he, like you said, best plate discipline in the system. Really controls the zone, patient, draws a lot of walks, and the thing is he's trying to play left field. More likely, maybe just ends up at first base. So he's going to have to hit a ton and hit for power. And the power has never really been like a big part of his game. And if you just look at his season numbers overall, you won't see big power numbers. But if you look at maybe the progression of his season, you start to see more power. And I don't think it was entirely a fluke because he made some swing adjustments in there where, like, he just, his hands would kind of like shoot away from his body when he was starting his swing. And then he made an adjustment to, just keep his hands a little bit tighter in, get some more quickness to his stroke. And you started to see him drive the ball harder. You could see it in the exit velocity numbers, which started to jump for him toward the end of the season. So if you just look at, his season as a whole, you might still think the power is more of a question mark. And it still kind of is, right? Like we want to see how it holds up over a full season and see how this, translates against upper level pitching. But there were some pretty promising adjustments that I think he made there by the end of the season to start to tap into some more power. So, you combine that with the foundation of his strike zone discipline and pretty good, just, pure bat to ball skills. If he can tap into some more power, I think he's a pretty interesting, I don't know if you call him sleeper or not at this point, but definitely kind of an interesting, real late round pick to keep an eye on who's getting a little bit closer.
And you talk about kind of the jump in raw numbers for guys. Ricky Tiedemann is someone who had quite a jump last year as well. I mean, when the Blue Jays drafted him, it kind of, you'd ask around and kind of hear that the club saw a lot of untapped potential there. They thought, this is a guy who maybe could add some velo and sort of ramp up his stuff just with access to a pro environment and resources, coaching, pitching tech, things like that. Lo and behold, he turns pro, and all of a sudden he's like sitting 96, and he's made this really rapid progress in terms of his stuff. How do you evaluate him going forward? Because he's still so young, and he looks so different now than he did going into the draft. Like, I feel like there must be a bunch of variance in just how you could kind of project him going forward.
Yeah, we start doing the Blue Jays top 30 list going into the off season, and had a sense of where he would be, and making calls around on him, and I could ask a question about Tiedemann and be like, oh yeah, like he was 94 to 98, and I'd be like, no, like Ricky Tiedemann, not like who are you talking about? They're like, yeah. Oh no, that was no, he made a huge velocity jump from when he was in junior college in California, where all of our reports consistently throughout the year were 88 to 93, scraping a 94. And then I don't think he even, or maybe he threw a 94 at, instructional league. That was probably his lowest end fastball there. It's, obviously shorter burst, but we didn't see 98 in college. Really good athlete, 6'4" lefty, pretty young for a JUCO guy. I think he was drafted at 18 still. So, some good projection indicators there. But it came on pretty quickly. So, third round pick, if they redraft him today, I don't think he's making it to the third round because it's just a very different fastball than what it was coming out of junior college. So, like we have him ninth. Maybe that's too low. Like it's hard to know how much to account for this big jump in velocity, but it's a good changeup to go with it. So sometimes when a guy makes that like really fast velo jump, like you hope it's not, putting up more stress on his elbow or something, but I would definitely rather have Ricky Tiedemann throwing 98 than Ricky Tiedemann throwing 94. So it's one of the one of the more encouraging and quick developments to happen between the draft and the offseason for them.
And then my final deep cut is Samad Taylor, who had like this really interesting 2021 as well. And I feel like the evaluations on him are like so all over the place, right? Because it was the numbers at AA are super splashy, right? Walked a bunch, huge power numbers, but also huge strikeout numbers as well, and swing and miss. So like depending on who you ask, like he could be unlocking something and finally tapping into his potential, or he could be the product of like an unsustainable all or nothing approach that will ultimately do him in as he reaches higher levels. Like where do you kind of fall on him between these two poles, and what do you make of how just varied the evaluations are?
Yeah, I mean, were you guys surprised that they didn't put him on the 40 man or?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I thought there was a good chance. I mean, just again, I wasn't watching him in person for obvious reasons this year, but yeah, like the numbers were really good, really good.
Yeah,
And,
like I get,
that,
I could see why they would protect, like a Hagen Danner, like, if they don't put him on, like, yeah, like he throws 100 miles an hour, somebody's going to take a chance on him potentially. And I could see like, other guys they have in that utility type role. So I guess it's a good problem to have when you have that 40-man crunch, but I don't know exactly what the state of the Rule 5 is going to be at the moment. I assume they will have one, if and when this lockout ends, but I think he's a prime candidate to join another organization. Because like you said, it's, split camp on him where, if you like him, you see a really, explosive athlete with well above average speed who can, not shortstop really, but, can play second base, can play center field. Certainly the speed to go out there, and a lot of bat speed. I mean, he's not that big, about 5'10", but some of the better just pure bat speed in the organization. So, made some adjustments and you saw a little bit more power from him this year. But it is still a high strikeout rate. The swing is kind of in and out of the zone pretty quickly. So there's not a lot of margin for error. So you see some more strikeouts with him. But I think there's, if you're just looking at a Rule 5 draft and he's out there, I think somebody is going to, take a chance on him and hope they can help him cut down on some of the swing and miss, especially for, it's not like he's 25 years old and, kind of is what it is. He's still, 23 at this point. So I think there's, a good chance he ends up somewhere else potentially.
I guess the other read is that it's telling that the Blue Jays know more about him than anyone and made the decision not to put him on the 40-man roster. Like that probably says something as well about how they evaluate him internally, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think they like if you just talk to evaluators of other clubs, like you can find people who would be much higher on him, I think, than maybe or at least what the Blue Jays are at least suggesting through their 40-man roster decisions. But again, I can kind of see why they would do it based on who else they had to protect and who probably offers more, maybe long-term value to the organization with, somebody like Julio Jimenez and those type of guys too.
So May, I'll finish with you on this one. I'm sure that like you get asked ad nauseum for who's your sleeper, who's the breakout, who's the next big thing. I'm curious to hear like who's a player that you like in this system, or a couple guys that just have like a high likelihood of becoming an average, run-of-the-mill, completely unremarkable big leaguer, right? So like not an all-star, not a guy that's going to sign a big free agent contract, like somebody who's going to be OPS plus right around 100 or ERA plus right around 100, just like the back-end starter, the versatile bench piece, like the Eric Sogard, the Ross Detweiler. Like who do you see from this group who has a decent chance of having that kind of career?
I actually don't think I get asked that often who will be the run-of-the-mill type guy to watch, but like Zach Logue is is an intriguing guy. Left-handed pitcher in Buffalo last year who is, just kind of is what he is. I think at this point he's 25, almost 26. But his velocity did jump up a little bit this past season. Topping out at 94 from the left side, and his changeup made some strides too. I think that's an above average pitch for him. You look at the numbers he had in AAA, they were pretty good. He threw strikes, had a pretty solid strikeout rate. So I think he's somebody who is like a good depth option, back end starter. I think sometimes we overrate the safety, quote unquote, of guys who project to be back end starters. So maybe it's an up and down type guy ultimately. But I think he has some of those attributes where he's pretty close to being big league ready right now, and I could see him being a guy who could make some starts in the back of a rotation this season.
I kept predicting last summer that he would get traded. It never happened, but maybe it'll happen once they. Not that I want him to get traded. I mean, it'd be great if he came up here and did his thing in Toronto. But I just got that vibe, and we'll see where that leads here. But that's an interesting.
Well, I ask because the mistake I think we make sometimes with prospects is everyone's looking for this guy's going to be an all-star. This guy's going to win batting titles. This guy's going to win MVPs. Sure. Not that many guys actually end up doing that, but I think the hallmark of a really good system is, do you produce productive big leaguers, like guys who contribute at a big league level with positive wins above replacement numbers, not 5-6 win players, but like half win, 1 win. Like you need those guys. Like you need those players. Otherwise you're going to have to go out and try to find them on the free agent market. So like, it is interesting to me that the Blue Jays have guys like Zach Logue. I don't know if you put, Bowden Francis into that camp as well. Like, guys who aren't going to be remarkable big leaguers or all-stars, but guys who can contribute to a contending team as depth pieces.
Yeah, I mean, that, it could be, I mean, they're obviously higher up in the organization, or at least on their rankings, but that could be like the Kevin Smith or Otto Lopez, those types of guys where, they're pretty close to being big league ready, if not there right now. So maybe not the highest ceiling guys or the sexiest profiles where I don't know that anybody's projecting them to be, these, perennial all-stars or anything like that. But two guys who I think have another pretty good chance just to be solid major league contributors, but probably not impact, or high impact type guys.
Ben Badler writes about prospects for Baseball America. You can follow him on Twitter at Ben Badler. Read his stuff at Baseball America. You should definitely subscribe because it is a great publication. Tons of good information every year. We can't thank you enough for the time, man. This has been awesome. It's been great to hear your insight. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you guys so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks again to Ben Badler. Follow him on Twitter at Ben Badler. My name's Arden Swelling, and he is Ben Nicholson Smith. Our producers this week were Christian Ryan and Nick Andrade. I want to thank all of you for listening. We'll talk to you next time on At the Letters.